We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the HaltingWinter podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the HaltingWinter podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Jeff Weckbach, Township Administrator at Colerain Township in Ohio. Jeff, welcome to the podcast. It is a pleasure to have you on today.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me today, Seth. Look forward to it.
Yeah, I look forward to digging into your story. You know, I've only had a few people from Ohio on. In fact, I was talking to the team out there about coming out to their latest. I think you guys just had a City Managers Association conference, didn't you?
Next week, actually.
Oh, so, it's next week. That's right.
7 days from airing.
That's right. It's coming around the corner. So, well, I'm sure we'll talk about that association and just the importance of having network in such a unique role as you have as a township administrator. But before we do that, before we get to the professional career, we got to do what we do here on the HaltingWinter podcast. We got to get to know you, Jeff,
Sure.
in this incredible German last name, Weckbach. As Winterhalter, we've already bonded together. Take us back to the beginning, Jeff. Tell us a little bit about where you were born and kind of the childhood that shaped you.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Northern Kentucky. So Northern Kentucky is kind of unique in that we view ourselves in a different way from the rest of the state. We're almost like part of the Cincinnati metro. And so there's a lot more of that affinity and culture with the greater Cincinnati region. So grew up there, went to college there, went to Northern Kentucky University, had one of those, what are you going to do when you get older moments? And in college, we had a professor tell us all we had to go and interview somebody in a field we might have an interest in. So reached out to the city manager of Cincinnati at the time, who was Milton Dohoney, and he was gracious enough to give me an hour. And back then I didn't think much of it, but like looking back at it, I'm like, holy cow, he gave me an hour of his time to have me interview him. And I don't remember exactly what we talked about, but I remember there being a moment in it where I asked him what he didn't like about his job. And everything he said, I thought to myself, that just sounds like so much fun. And so everything that he said was terrible, I thought would be fun. So I dove in head first, then went and got my degree from Northern Illinois and at an MPA out there. And then just haven't looked back. Been working in local government ever since, in cities, counties, and now I'm at a township. So it's kind of it all.
I love it. I love it. Okay, we got to unpack. I've had Milton on the podcast. I love Milton. He's one of my favorite people in the world. Just a great, stellar guy, doing great work now in Ann Arbor as a city administrator in Michigan. But let's go back. So again, this is interesting. This is where I love getting to know places. And so, like you said, Northern Kentucky, a little bit interesting. More identifies with Ohio and Cincinnati, kind of the area. And that's what's unique. You know, I'm a Seattle West Coast guy. And the West Coast is already, it feels kind of like Alaska to the rest of the world. When you say I'm from Washington, everyone thinks DC, right? And so our states are very even the Northwest, right? You have Washington, Idaho, Oregon. They're like diehard. Like if you're in Washington, you go to the UW or Washington State University. You'd never go to Oregon and betray like your state,
Yeah.
right? And yet that's interesting, like the borders out there and kind of like where you identify. So you're growing up, and what caused you to even think about when your high school was like, hey, you got to go interview a leader? What made you think about city management? Was there any local government awareness on your radar? Did you have relatives that worked in it?
No, actually, at the time, I didn't even know what a city manager was. I didn't know what the job really was. It was when it was in college when I had to do that interview, and I had tried a private sector sales job for a semester. Absolutely hated it. Had done a little nonprofit work as an intern and saw the fundraising side of it, and that wasn't exactly exciting to me, knowing how much of your job revolves around that. And so I thought, well, I got to figure something out. And government sounded interesting. And thankfully, I mean, Milton was so accessible that it made it easy. And, from there, then you start digging in and learning more about what a city manager is and what they do. And it's really neat that you kind of take almost like CEO of a large organization, but making sure that the roads get fixed and parks are open and all that fun stuff,
I
water.
love it. Okay,
So
so it's in college that you do the meetup. Okay, so let's back it up then. When you're growing up, what is Jeff interested in? What is Jeff doing? Is Jeff an
no,
athlete? Is Jeff building
sure.
computers? What's Jeff doing?
Yeah. Well, I was always doing sports, all kinds of different sports growing up. But I think if you ask my mother, she would say I was geared to be a lawyer because I could argue my way out of a paper bag. So that was always a problem. But no, it just really was sports and academics. So in grade school, it was the traditional basketball, baseball, soccer. In high school, it was cross country and wrestling, and that was a lot of it. And just all the fun that comes with being a high school student and figuring out what you want to do for college. And then in Kentucky, you either grow up loving sort of Kentucky basketball, or you're one of those people that likes the University of Louisville. And no disrespect their way, but my parents have the VHS tapes of the 1996 and 1998 Kentucky basketball championship still at their house.
That's
And I
right.
suspect that they keep their VHS player just for that reason. So definitely a lot of that in the household growing up.
I love it. So when you go to Northern Kentucky University, I mean, from your kind of resume, I mean, we've got political science, criminal justice, economics, philosophy, public administration, geography.
Sure.
Did you go kind of going like, I don't really know. I just kind of want to kind of
Yeah.
dabble in a bunch of classes and kind of figure it out? Like, what did you think you were going
Yeah.
to
So
Northern
I,
Kentucky?
I guess I was lucky enough in high school that I was able to earn enough college credit that I had most of my gen eds out of the way when I got to college. Um, and not knowing what I wanted to do, rather than changing majors, I just added majors along the way because I was far enough along I could do that, and was fortunate enough to do that. So, uh, and each one of those degrees kind of gave me a different little bit of a lens into the field. Um, and I remember one of the courses that I had to take was like a public policy course, and they're talking about the iron triangle of like the three spokes of the bureaucracy and how it works. And you're just sitting in class and going like, well, if this concept is this, then this is probably going to be the next thing that they talk about. And then when the professor says it, you're like, oh, well, maybe I need to explore this public administration thing a little more. And so um, NKU didn't have a major in public admin. It was only a minor. And so that led to sort of that, well, what's my next step and how do I find the best way to get my foot in the door in this field and kind of learn as I go, right? Because most of us learn on the job, not necessarily everything in the classroom. And NIU had a great program where they helped you get an internship day one. And so working, 2 full years in a city, and back then rules were a little different around internships. You could work, up to 40 hours a week, and it wasn't a requirement to get healthcare and all that kind of stuff. So we had a little more hours we could do, but yeah, it was just a great way to get into the field.
I love it. So you wrap up at NKU and then you head to Northern Illinois University. And again, we've had Dawn Peters on, who works with the executive director of both Illinois and Wisconsin city management, but she's out of Northern Illinois. I was just with the ILCMA and met Thomas Skuzinski, who's the interim department chair for the MPA. And man, he was a sharp guy. And we were talking about like just the importance like of the pipeline. And it seems like your story is kind of unique because it seems like you have the interaction with Milton and you're kind of like, this is what I want to do. I'm fascinated. I'm hooked. Most people I've had on the podcast who are current public, city managers, city administrators had no idea. They had to weave and wind and didn't really even know the role existed until far after college. And so it's kind of unique that, while you're there at Northern Illinois University, a couple things happen, and I want to highlight this. First, you talk about an internship, and I want to dive into that. But also, while you're there, or actually back up, while you're at Northern Kentucky University, you're also working. You're having to make, you're a summer residential advisor, desk manager, community connections, Norse Explorer tour guide. What in the world? I love it. You just seem busy. You seem, and I think part of this is not just that, some people need to work to pay the bills, but there's something about experience. And I think it's one of the things I like to encourage young people, whether that's an internship, whether that's just work, like meet people, do things. I'm concerned that too many people are living inside their dorms, scrolling TikTok, and that's their experience to the world is through kind of a third reality instead of like going to experience and learning stuff, because you learn about yourself as you're doing these. You never know who you meet. So maybe talk about both the NKU and then we can talk about Northern, and then we can talk about
But you hit the nail on the head. Something that I tell students is along the same breath, right? Like intern early and intern often, because you find out more about what you don't like from those internships so that you maybe don't pigeonhole yourself into a career that you're going to hate. And so to your point about just kind of looking at my profile and seeing all the different things that I did when I was at NKU, a lot of that was just figuring out what you don't like doing sales for an insurance agency. Sounded great when I signed up for it. And then it just was not for me. I found out I'm not a very good salesman. And then working at the nonprofit, it was government adjacent. And so I got to see what that was like, but got the exposure to those other things. Being a tour guide, I got to kind of just walk around campus and figure out how to walk backwards and talk at the same time. But for me, that was just more of a great way to dial back into the university. And then some of those other jobs were just the jobs that you kind of have just to get by with your day to day. And at the same time, you learn a lot of those essential skills about what it's like to be in an office environment. So as desk manager, it was almost like a glorified title for the mailman for one of the dorms. So that was 90% of what I was doing was just stuffing people's mailboxes with whatever care packages their parents sent them, what have you. But then you got to learn customer service. Somebody comes and says, "Hey, I never got my Amazon package." And how do you navigate that to help them get what they want? Or, a student comes and they've got a question about, I don't know, faucet isn't working, this, that, or the other thing. And then you got to interact with bosses and kind of navigating what it's like to just be in the real world, but in almost like a safe space because it's part of the university and, not like your livelihood fully depends on it because you're still going to school and all of that. So definitely a lot there. One of my other sort of internships was with General Electric, working on their disaster preparedness plans for all their different sites throughout the country. And so that was neat to just kind of get that exposure into the emergency management side of the world. And I was reminiscing with one of our fire individuals recently about COVID and how I had completely forgotten back in 2012-ish that I actually had to write plans for a pandemic and how we would mass distribute different vaccinations. And at the time thinking like, oh, that'll never happen. And then fast forward, we're a decade later and we all did those things. And so it's just weird how an experience back then in college that you think may have nothing to do with what you're going to do then does come into play later on. And that's where that diversity of just trying things out really goes a long way for any college student.
I think it's so good because I think about some of the stories we've had on. I think David Dillner just came to mind, El Dorado, Kansas. and he got interested in like the web and the internet, and like ended up like randomly building the website for the city. Like they needed a
Sure.
new website. It was back when the web was just coming out, and here's this guy who was it's not like he has any, it's not like that's his profession or anything. He's just like, I'll help out, and that totally turned him on to government, and just a unique like stories of how it happens. And that's where I think, again, young people can be like, oh, I'm taking out loans, I don't need to work, I'll just kind of use college to play. And it's like, again, I'm not telling you got to go, do the grind, but like there are opportunities, I think, to learn experientially. So tell us about when you're at Northern Illinois University. I love that the like NIU does this, KU. I'm sure there are others, Arizona, Syracuse, et cetera, some of the top programs. But I think they've become, the great programs are great for city management because they require an internship at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
They get your hands dirty, and the best internships allow you to kind of be a part of a lot of different departments. What was your internship like? Who was it with? Tell us a little bit about that experience, how it opened your eyes.
Yeah. So, well, first, the process was just fascinating in NIU because you go out for 2 days and you interview with, I think, 8 to 10 different, when I did it, 8 to 10 different communities. And then the next day you just sit by the phone and wait until they call you. Now they may have changed the process since then, but it was kind of nerve wracking at the same time. And then you've got to decide like, okay, they called me first. Is that where I want to go or not? And I landed in a spot that was just the perfect fit for me. So down at Yorkville, it was a community of about 16,000 folks at the time. Great history there. Their city manager had been there for a while. It had been established. He's still there, in fact. And him and I touch base regularly, probably a couple times a year. But he kind of early on just recognized, hey, I'm going to give this kid as much work as he wants. Right. And so I remember, I don't remember if it was quite 6 months in or closer to a year in, he let me present the city budget, or at least part of it, to the city council. And I thought that was really cool. And then as sort of time went on, if he needed to leave the office, he didn't have a deputy. He would let me, fill in at council meetings on his behalf and things like that. And, you don't have the full scope of it. You're not necessarily dealing with the council and doing all that, but being able to take projects and kind of lead them from start to finish was really, really impactful and really helpful, because then when you graduate, you've got a portfolio when you go to interview. If you can walk in and say, hey, I did these things, and by the way, here's the actual final work product, like, I think most employers are going to be impressed by that. And so by being forced to do that for 2 years, that just really helped along the way.
I love that. What was that? Let's dive into that for a sec. Was that you asking? Was that him telling? Like, because I think that's one of the things, maybe if you're a young intern, you're kind of like maybe afraid to ask. You kind of are waiting for people to kind of push you into opportunities. And I always encourage, ask, because if you don't ask, the worst thing they can do is say no, and usually they're not going to. I think they want to give ownership away, they want to help you in your environment, but sometimes you gotta put forward the effort there. What did that look like in that relationship?
Yeah, I think it's a combination, right? And I would say early on in my internship experience, I did not know to ask, right? So I had to learn what that looked like, because if you finish your work, you don't want to go bother the boss, but then you quickly realize when you bother the boss to ask for more work, you're actually making their job maybe easier. And so that goes a long way. And so similar to what you were saying, now, if I have an intern at my office, first thing I tell them is, if your workload's light, just come tell me. I'll gladly give you like 5 more projects, because that makes my job easier and makes you more marketable at the end of the day. And so I think early on, Bart was able to recognize times when I needed a little more. And so he threw that at me. And then slowly, and we had weekly one-on-ones, which I think really helped. They would lead to me more asking, or, then just after 6 months, you start to be more aware of city issues, and it's, hey, can I help with this one or help with that? So, if you're always looking, you should hopefully be able to find a project or two that somebody just hasn't had the time for it, and they'll gladly take the help.
I love that. I love that. You Bart, you said it he was desirable to help you, and I think that's what we need. I get it, we're busy, we got a lot on our plates, but the upcoming future of the of our cities needs leaders to be developed, and the opportunity for internships, the opportunity to really be intentional and not just have interns where they're in the back, sorting papers, but actually doing some of that work and giving them ownership. I think that's where, like you say, then there's like, yeah, I gotta perform. Like, let's do it. So I think it's awesome. So you finish up, you get your MPA, you spend a couple years in Yorkville, and then all of a sudden, somehow, the county grabs you. You say no to the city, and you go to Hamilton County Government, Ohio. This is where Cincinnati is in. Tell us about now you're full time, right? You're going to be a budget analyst, and you're in the county. What was different about that? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah. So, going back home is always great when you can do that. And so when the job at Hamilton County came up, that was a good fit. Especially because it gave an opportunity to be a small fish in a massive pond, right? So being an analyst, you're way down on the totem pole. At county, I think it has probably in excess of 4,000 employees. So a little bit more of a cog in the wheel, but county government is just a completely different animal compared to city government. You learn that it's more about relationships than authority, because in most circumstances, while you may in the commissioner's office or county administration have control over the budget, you don't have control over the programs. You don't have control over the implementation. That may be a separately elected, body that then handles how that functions. And so it's a lot more about being able to influence folks and getting them to move in the right direction so that you can all move in the same speed. And at that level, it may be a little more political at times too, because, if the races have an R or a D attached to the end, and if you got to somehow maneuver and bring together Republican and Democrat on, across the aisle, I think that's where us as these local government nerds, as we call ourselves, really come to play, because we try to be apolitical. We're not here for what's best for your party or their party. We're just here to do what's right for the people that we serve. And let's find a pathway to make it happen.
Isn't that interesting about county? Because again, I'm a local government, I am the flag waver of local government, because I think it is radically different than state and federal,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
are so political and so policy centered that then it's local government that has to implement those usually.
Yeah.
And so, but county, like you said, we've had on a number of county administrators or people that have been in county as well as city. And it, like you just said, it's really about relationship. It's a lot slower because there's elected bodies that can be political. You got sheriffs, judges, etc. And then a county is also made up of cities and townships. And so it's got to get them on board. So it is a totally unique environment, like you say, different than just working in your municipality. And yet it's similar in that like you said, you are delivering the services that are really apolitical, like health and all the roads. Like, I'm not driving an unincorporated county going, I'm glad Republicans are paving these roads and not Democrats. Like, it's ridiculous.
You're just happy somebody's paving them.
That's right. And so you're still delivering the essential services that people need regardless of politics. And yet it can become political, which then is frustrating. So you serve, let's see, you budget analyst, senior policy manager, again, population of counties like 837,000. Again, Cincinnati's a part of this. What was that like being, your next stop is obviously going to be where you're at now, Colerain Township. What was that like being a part of such a huge organization and then coming down to a township, even though the township is still great size, 60,000?
Yeah.
What was that like? What was the difference? What was
Yeah. So one of the biggest differences that I noticed between the two was the level of interaction with day-to-day residents. Ironically enough, when I was at Hamilton County, I think I only received 2 to 3 calls from residents total to my desk in one way, shape, or form in my whole time there. Now, ironically enough, they happen to be Colerain residents. And so then when I moved to Colerain, we had already had a little bit of a baseline because I had spoken with these folks. But in Colerain, I probably don't go a day with at least talking to one resident who just gives a call with just a random issue. It could be a pothole. It could be tall grass. It could be, hey, I just want to know what's going on with this business in the community. And so it definitely, even though the county is still local government, it feels a lot more tactile at this level just because of those resident engagements. And even when we have issues that are county related, we'll encourage that resident to call the county. I don't know if they do or not, but they usually start by calling us. And oftentimes I'll get an ask of, well, can you just call the county? And we'll gladly do it. But it's an interesting dynamic that, when you wake up and you have your issue, you don't necessarily think to call your county leadership on issues. You call whomever you think is closest to you.
If you've attended a conference lately, I'm sure you've noticed that AI is everywhere in local government right now. In fact, it comes up in many of the conversations I have with leaders from across the country every week. There's so much to be excited about. The idea that we can streamline work, reduce repetitive tasks, and really help residents get what they need faster. These are all amazing things. It's one of the reasons I appreciate the way Tyler Technologies is approaching artificial intelligence. They're helping cities and counties like yours modernize workflows and use AI in practical ways that are actually improving operations and helping you deliver faster results for your residents. They've just released a new ebook. I want to encourage you to download it. It's called AI for Impact: Proven Results for Government. It highlights the real-world examples of how agencies are using AI right now to strengthen their daily operations to better serve their communities. That ebook, it's yours completely free. Head over to tylertech.com/winter to download your copy. And if you're going to be attending the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference in Washington, D.C., I want to encourage you to connect with the Tyler team there, get your questions answered, engage, and learn more about how you can implement and use AI in your context. Again, go download that free guide. It's at tylertech.com/winter, tylertech.com/winter. Now, back to the conversation. Yeah, speak to that because, again, I'm in Olympia, the capital city of Washington, and we have a lot of state workers. I have a lot of friends who are state workers. Sure. And it seems to me that it can be very, what's the word I want to use? Depressing is the first word that comes to my mind. This work, because it's so disconnected from people. Like you say, when you work for a city, you see, like you're not only seeing the work that you're doing on a daily basis connect to people, but you're also running into them. They can come to City Hall, and they often do, they voice their complaints, where especially when you're at a huge county like that, again, you can be so disconnected that that you're doing missional work, but you can be so behind the scenes that you forget the mission. You can get stuck in the bureaucracy and the red tape of it. And I think the higher up you go, state, federal, it just gets worse and worse. You get more removed and removed. Talk about that when you're in the county. How do you stay connected to the mission? How do you stay out of the bureaucracy and the red tape and find purpose in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's all about goals and making sure that you're all working toward whatever that end goal in mind is. And, when you're in one of the silos like a budget office, the goal is to make sure you've got a balanced budget. And so if you're able to make that happen, that helps. If you're able to have a meeting where you convince somebody to change how they're doing something in order to save dollars in the long run, like that can feel like a big win. And there's still the events that you go to that are put on by the county or that are county related, or, if you're in the courthouse walking through, you see the constituents. Now it's a different environment because they're not necessarily looking to you and asking to you for help. But if, you worked on a project that led to a redesign of the restrooms in the courthouse, and then you see people using the restrooms in the courthouse, that still is satisfying in some way, shape, or form. And so you gotta look for those moments and make those connections. It can be a little more front and center, though, for me at least, in the municipal side and the city and township side, because I can go to that park and I can touch that park a little more readily than I can go to a social service program and see that necessarily in action.
Yeah, it seems like in a municipality, those things, the parks, the downtown economic development, you just can't, in any drive, anytime you drive to work and drive home, you're going to see the things that you guys are touching, the things that you're interacting. Whereas in the county, it can be a little more difficult because, again, how many times do you even go to a courthouse? How many times are you might not even be using the health services or whatnot that you're doing. So I think that's where leadership, just encourage the leaders, remember helping your employees see the connection of what
Yep.
they do on a daily basis, even if they're in an office doing budget
Yep.
analyst work, how that connects to everyday human life. I think that motivates and inspires to go, I'm making a difference. The work that I do does contribute to the tapestry of the difference of actually lives. And so I think it's so important. You, even before you go to Colerain Township, you serve as an adjunct professor at NKU, Northern Kentucky
Sure.
University. Talk about that, just because I think it's such a cool opportunity to give back. And obviously it shows that made an impact on you. What was that experience like? What was it like being now on the other side of the podium as a
Yeah.
teacher?
It was fun. So I did a semester, taught a 400 level course. It was about politics and action. And so for me, it was really neat to try to take concepts of what you see in everyday life and in the job, and then impart that on the students on how the world works. Taking what's in a textbook. So there's two books that we really taught on in that class. One was called The Myth of the Rational Voter, and that book really dives into the fact that a lot of people focus in on non-economic reasons for how they vote. And that's sort of the basis of it, and how, there's a big group this side and big group that side. There's very few in the middle that kind of swing things one way or another. And of course, it tries to showcase that most of us aren't rational when we're voting. Um, and and while we taught on that, one of the things that I then turned and asked the students: have you ever gone into the ballot box, seen an election, and had no idea what the job was? So you're voting for clerk of courts for your county. Do you know what the clerk of courts does? If you're voting and you don't know, have we done a disservice there? Because now we might be choosing somebody that maybe has no idea how that job works, functions, what have you, but we're just picking. Or if you haven't done any research on that and you're voting, are you picking based off of the name that you like the best? Are you picking off of some other characteristics? Which one's first, which one's second? And so that's kind of the basis behind the book. And what I appreciated was, at the end of the semester, one of their assignments was they had to find a local or state race, research the position, and then research the policy platform of the candidates and tell me if those aligned. And the majority of the students found that the policy platforms were tied to these things that had nothing to do with the actual position, but they were the things that the voters wanted to hear. And so my hope was that just opened folks' eyes and minds to realize that there's a lot more that goes into the day to day, and who's setting the direction, and understanding that there's a deeper level to what is out there. So that was one piece of it, and then the other piece was just kind of really digging in on how policy goes from being in that policy realm into actual tactile action. And so we talked a lot about things like these conspiracy theories that are out there. And like, if you and your friends have some sort of secret that you're doing, can the two of you not talk about it? Well, if you question that, imagine saying that there are hundreds of people across the globe that are all like not talking about something. Like, so just trying to dispel some of that mythology that's out there around all that, and that there's usually a good reason for these things and why they're happening. And if you just go and ask these folks, they'll gladly tell you. So it was definitely a lot of fun. It was challenging. I was teaching that right after we had our first kid. So navigating, like, being a new parent, teaching a course, and doing all that, it was great. But yeah, it was definitely a lot.
I love it. I love I love what you're, that project too, about making them really look at the things. It's one of the things out here every time there's an election. It's just like, one of the frustrating things is the voter pamphlets. It's just like everything's written in such a way that's not helpful. It's kind of like bills today. It's just like, can we just have clarity? Can we just know what we're doing? But I think it is important, like helping them. I think it's one of the things I love. In fact, we're looking at doing a virtual conference here called the Municipal 7, where we give 7 minutes to just municipal leaders around the nation to talk about what they're up to. And one of the things we want to, the first one I think is going to be on citizen academies. How do we do citizen academies in our cities to help local residents just understand what their government, what local government does? I think that's part of the issue. If we're frustrated that no one shows up to vote, and we're frustrated that all we hear about is when things are broken, maybe it's because they don't really know what we do. And I mean, it's kind of the story of this podcast. Most city managers today had no idea even that role existed or what it was. And so what can we do to
Yeah.
help people right through these academies, and not only for residents but for, I think, young people. Let them know that this is what, because I think it's so fascinating. I've been so fascinated by, I don't think there's an area of interest that a young person can have that can't find fulfillment in a local government position, from science to law to
Yep.
HR, clerking. I mean, all kinds of communication, all kinds of skills that are needed to make a thriving local government. So then in 2018, you end up in Colerain as the assistant administrator. Tell us about this journey. What made you transition from county into municipality?
Sure. So I knew I wanted to get into the city management type of field more directly. And so at the time, I was kind of exploring opportunities and applying for different jobs, trying to find one that would be a good fit. And at the time, Colerain's position that was open was the Township Administrator role. And I was going through the process, and I remember sitting down with a mentor and saying, like, man, if they offered me the assistant and not the administrator role, I think that'd be perfect. But I was in the process for the administrator. I think after 5 or 6 rounds of interviews, we got down to 2 finalists. It was myself and another person, and the board was divided. And coming out of that, they made the decision that, hey, if we make our interim manager the manager, and Jeff, you wanted to come on as the assistant, would you like that? And I said, that's perfect. In fact, that's what I told somebody would be my preference from the start. So it kind of magically worked out that way. And then just haven't really looked back since that moment. So it's been a lot of fun. Colerain's a kind of a nice community in that we've got a bit of everything. So we've got a bit of urban, suburban, and rural. Any problem that you can think of in those places, we've got in some way, shape, or form. So we get to tackle everything, which is awesome.
Let's dive into that. The city, I think the population is around 60,000. It's
Yep.
northwestern Cincinnati. Is that right? And
Yep.
so tell us about, before we, because I want to dive into what it was like to go from county into now you're in it. Now you're the assistant. What was that like? But also, what was it like in the city? What did you guys back in 2018? What were you guys up to? What was even the size of the city then compared to now? And those unique variables of having kind of, the three dynamics of urban, suburban, rural.
Yeah. So the community has been about the same size. The last 2 to 3 censuses, there hasn't been a huge shift. We've got a little bit of growth going on right now. So I'm excited to see if our numbers go up next go around in 2030. But yeah, back then we wanted to really just do government the best way possible was sort of our goal. And there was a big push locally for transparency. That was something, because there was a turnover election, and that was kind of what the new board had ran on. And so we used that as an opportunity to do better when it came to getting our job descriptions out there so anybody could see them, do better about getting our budget information out there, do better about how we plan our work and do our work. And so we took a lot of actions to start to build some foundations. And so, since then we've started to have a strategic plan, and then we follow up on it and we make sure that we're doing it, and we're following through. And every year since we've been here, we've had our budget online so everybody can see every dollar, how it's spent, where it's being allocated. You get down to the nitty gritty of each individual line, and if you don't like that we're spending it on this, well, please come tell us, and we'll glad you hear you out on it. And so, really, we wanted to start with just let's do good government, get that foundation in place, and then start to push and find where we can do better. And so, whether that's stopping things that aren't working and we shouldn't do, or starting up new programs, or just tweaking around the edges. So it's been kind of a fun journey over, I guess, 7, 8 years now to just kind of see stuff that you started to put in motion now start to come through to fruition.
Yeah. 2018 to 2022 is when you serve as the assistant administrator. You become the township administrator in 2022. You go through, that means you walk through the pandemic, and I'm sure that changed things, especially when you're in a big urban environment like, Cincinnati.
Yeah.
It's a lot different than being out in the middle of nowhere. What was that experience like? And then walk us through then, become the township administrator. Now you're in the big seat. Now you got to deal. You're the lightning. I always say it's like the municipal tightrope, being the lightning rod of now you're the one who's got to deal with electeds, be the face of the community, head over the staff. What was that whole experience like?
Yeah. So I'll start with the latter, and that was just it was a it was a pretty abrupt change. We had a frank conversation at home before put in for it, just to make sure that it made sense, because my assumption was it'd be a lot more nights, late hours, that sort of thing, and the team at home has to all be on the same page for that to work. And it's a big transition, in my opinion, because you move from being in the weeds a little more and actually you know churning the work, to now you've got to be a little more front facing, and your time is being put into those meetings with community leaders and the elected officials and different things like that. And so you don't have as much time to dedicate to those projects and actually seeing them from start to finish. And so it's navigating, and some of the challenges that I even still at times struggle with is, how do you relinquish something that you maybe saw as your baby and you put all this time and effort into, and let someone else take it and make it even better, because 9 times out of 10 they do. um, but you're just having to transition that mindset, and you know, being more active and talking to folks more and just going out and about, like that's a big part of it, because you've got to be able to not only know what the needs of the elected officials are, but what the needs of the community are, because there's a concentric circle somewhere out there where there's a voice being missed, and so you got to do your best to try to find that voice.
Talk about, I think you mentioned something really important here, because I think a lot of assistants that I engage with across the nation are a bit hesitant to take the big role, because because of the two things. Like you said, you kind of don't get like, it's a great job being an assistant because you get to actually do the work. You get to be in the weeds and be, hands-on projects. And so not only do you have to kind of give that up and then just kind of be over all these things, but then you kind of also you become the lightning rod of some of that. You become the face of the chaos. And like you say, there is a more demand on family time. And there's also the risk, I think, because an assistant usually isn't going to be fired if the election, turns out into it. But the city manager can, and which is unfortunate because it's an apolitical position. They're just there to do the will, regardless of kind of who's in, but it's not always seen that way. So there is how have you, maybe my question for you is, that I think would be helpful to the audience, when you transition into that role of now the township administrator, how did you go about making sure you could give things off in that ownership away so that you're not just continuing to wear both hats and then kill yourself and run to burnout?
Yeah. I think it's just trying it, and then when you see the rewards of trying it, right? So I remember early on in my tenure as the administrator, there was a project that I would have loved to have done. It was a budget related project related to something in the police department, and I knew I didn't have the time. So I looked at a police lieutenant and I said, "Hey, will you do this?" And I was expecting it to take a few weeks. I think 2 days later, I had a memo on my desk, and it was better than anything I could have ever imagined. And for me, that was that aha moment of like, man, I've got this amazing team. I need to just let them, I need to let them soar, right? Like, I can't clip their wings by wanting to do the work myself. And so, when you've got and I feel extremely blessed with the team I've got here, when you've got these amazing partners in your organization that you can just trust, and then you can just start to give them the projects and know that it's not only going to get done, but it's going to get done like 10 times better than you could have ever imagined. That's great. But it took that pivotal moment early on when I was in a crunch and I just needed to get something done, that I had to hand it off, for me to wake up to that, oh, I don't have to do this all myself. I can let some others kind of step up to the plate and really knock it out of the water, or knock it out of the park. So
yeah, that's kind of the issue, right? Like, until you're kind of forced, the natural proclivity of a leader is to do and to take it on. And I think that's also, I talk a lot about the danger of servant leadership. I love servant leadership. I love its philosophy, but everything has a shadow side. Every strength has a shadow. And the shadow of servant leadership is you feel so responsible that you don't give up ownership and empowerment, because you feel like everything's and you become the plug in the pipeline. And like you say, if you've got to touch everything, you're never going to produce your best work if you have to be so spread thin like that. But also, you kind of neuter the impact and the zeal of your culture, because people feel like they're just kind of cogs in the wheel doing little work, instead of really feeling the responsibility of, man, this is, I have to like step up and soar with this. It's mine. And so I just encourage leaders make sure. I think it's sometimes, like again in your story, you're kind of forced into it in that moment, but if you can get yourself out of your head before you're forced to it, you will create a much healthier culture of ownership, and all tides rise, right? It allows you then to soar as the leader of the organization, and you're still there to help if need be, but man, let people try, and that's good failure when it's like, hey, we tried it, maybe, yeah, here's how we can help, and then you allow them to step up instead of, burnout's also a part of boredom, I think. And people get bored if they don't have ownership and
Sure.
responsibility.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a good point there about servant leadership, because that probably is the most difficult thing, is that you don't want to ask somebody to do something that you'd be willing to do yourself, right? Or that you want to be. And so it's recognizing, though, that just because you're willing to do it doesn't mean you have the time to do it. And so maybe you do need to allow some others to step up and knock it out. And there is risk with it, and that's part of the difficulty in the top seat. Is there will be a project, there will be an email, there will be a memo that somebody puts something in there that slips through and then creates controversy, and you've got to be willing to own that, and follow on that. And that can be tough at times, but the the hope and expectation that I have is that if the team is doing such great work every day out there, that we can have, something like that happen and it be okay, because we all are human. We're all going to make mistakes. And so, show us some grace when that happens, because we're bringing it every day, doing great work. And so when we are human, allow us to be human.
I want to take a quick moment to pause here, because there's something I hear over and over again as I talk to local government leaders from across the country. The work can often feel heavy. The expectations are high, and most days it can feel like you're carrying all that weight alone. That's why I created the Municipal Leadership Development Circle, or what we call the MLDC. The MLDC is a community of local government leaders from across North America who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of significant pressure, not just in theory, but in day-to-day practice. It's a place to think clearly, learn from others who truly understand your unique context and work, and to be reminded that you're not the only one navigating these unique challenges. If you're looking for connection, perspective, and a steady place to keep developing as a leader, I'd love for you to learn more. You can find details at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Tell us about maybe if there's some lessons learned from the pandemic, because again, the pandemic changed everything, right? All of a sudden that's what really got me into local government. Is I did a project with a county that was struggling with employee engagement after, because again, you had people showing up to have to do solid waste and trash pickup and the essential services. And especially with leadership, if you're a part of a larger organization, you could have had some leaders working from home. We had everyone work from home in Western Washington and for 2 years plus. And so it created kind of a culture where, man, am I appreciated? Like, I'm out here in the cold and my leader's zooming in. What did you guys learn from that? What now, like even you can talk about now with AI and kind of, it just seems like we're in a really interesting time of where you can't, government's failure motto is that, well, that's just the way we've always done it. And I think we're being hit straight up in the face of that. Just doesn't fly anymore, because the world has changed from both the pandemic, AI. Talk about that and what you guys are experiencing there in Colerain.
Yeah, I think the pandemic forced all of us to be open to remote type work environments. Now, in what we do, there is some value when you know that your police officers and your EMS and your public works crews are going to be here every day and being here. But it's also recognizing that if you're feeling a little under the weather, it's okay to work remote. Like, you might not be full on sick, but let's not risk getting the entire organization sick, because you may have, maybe you got your flu shot. And so you've got the flu and you're a carrier, but you don't have full on like symptoms, and now you're spreading it. So I think that's been really helpful to allow folks to feel empowered to, if you're not feeling the best, you can work remote for a little while if your job allows you. It's also taught us that, like you said, we have to be adaptable and flexible with the way technology is evolving. You never know what the next big thing is that you're going to have to be aware of and have to integrate into your workforce. AI has come in nine different ways, right? So, and being able to recognize it is a big one. Being able to recognize how you can use it though, and use it to your advantage is a big one too. And so, we've told folks like, feel free to use it, but just don't use it for decision making because you've got to be fully with it and have come to your conclusions. But yeah, pandemic, it was certainly interesting trying to navigate shifts, making sure you've always got healthy people so they can respond, making sure that the PPE is available, then getting through, the public events around testing sites and all of that. It really tested our resources and it made us think differently. It is funny looking back on all the notes that you saved that you thought were going to be super like important, and now you're going, oh, okay, well they were great, but maybe not as earth shattering as we thought they were going to be back then. Yeah, so I don't know if that really answered most of the question, but it just, yeah.
Well, I think it's good. It's good to look. I love how you're saying like both with the pandemic, things changed, but then they also kind of, it's a good opportunity to go, well, we don't have to just change for change sake. We can also, we're human. We're going to go back to normal, rhythms and comforts. That's what it's our proclivity, right? And yet when you say AI, like the temptation is, I just sense a lot now. There's a lot of like, oh, we got to be talking about AI. And it's like, dude, no one knows yet. It's so new. And I just saw something the other day about some company. It just seems like every other day, large companies are so using AI and it's wrong. It's wrong data. It's like, and it's like, again, this is new. It's not fleshed out yet. It's not the savior answer. So you can go work on a beach and do nothing. Like it's a tool. It's like having an intern almost. It's like some things are good and some things are not good because it doesn't know what it's doing.
Yeah, you can use it to help. It can help you along the way, but it shouldn't be the only thing that you rely on. So we actually, I mean, we adopted a policy on AI about a year ago, and its use in the office, and set some clear rules that for us will hopefully protect us legally, but then just sort of set those boundaries, right? Like if you're using AI for a first draft, just acknowledge that in a footer. This was generated with AI so that if there is something weird about it or the language sounds funny, like somebody knows, well, that's probably because a computer wrote it, not a person. Um, and it's okay to also use it to help fine tune, proofread, come up with crazy ideas that are off the wall. But, you know, then you actually have to do the work to make sure that that crazy idea makes sense. Don't just take it because a computer said it and do it. So
that's good insight, good advice. In light of, go back to like the pandemic, in light of now, just I think trying to figure out, local government, oftentimes leaders feel stress. There's always budget issues. There's always multiple hats you're wearing. It always feels like you probably got more on your plate than less. How do you navigate both for your team, for yourself, work-life balance things? My big keynote is work-life balance is BS. It's just, you just got to choose what are you going to be intentional about, both your personal life, your relational life, your vocational life. How do you do that for your team and for yourself?
yeah, it's one of those things that for the team, I usually tell them, look, if there's an important life event going on, be a kid's play, whatever, right? Go do that. Be present for that because there are only so many of those. The work is still going to be here. And I know that you're probably working more than 40 hours as it is. It's not the end of the world if you have to miss, a meeting here or a meeting there. Or if you've got an opportunity that you want to explore on a volunteer board, like, yes, make that happen. There will be benefits, I'm sure, in some way to us, whether it's your own growth and development, or could be just simply that you're now happier at the office, which means you work a little better. And, then we're just benefiting from that sort of externality. Um, Me personally, just where I live is far enough away from my office that I'm a nobody when I'm at my kids' events. So if I'm coaching a team, nobody knows what I do. Like half the folks, if I tell them I'm a city manager, I refer to how Chris Traeger was in Parks and Rec, and they go, "Oh," and that's usually the end of the conversation. Um, so I don't have to talk about work constantly when I'm sort of in my personal life, and that's a really helpful space to be. And so for me, that's kind of how I separate and balance. Not to say that there's not a phone call that comes or an issue that pops up that you have to deal with. It just makes it a little easier that you can be present because you're not, walking through the supermarket having everybody ask you when their road's going to be repaved.
That's absolutely true. Well, I love what you said too about just with your team, making sure that they remember, the city's going to be there tomorrow. What you do, and that's kind of the tension, right? It's the dichotomy of it's important work, it's missional work. It matters every day. The work you do matters, and yet no one's, the end of the world's not going to come if you are intentional and prioritize kids events, vacation, etc. Like you have to have that. I love what you said too about, if an employer does something externally that makes them happy, they're going to bring that happiness to work. And I think there's been this divide of like work life. When we hear work life balance, we also are like, well, what's at work stays at work, and no one knows me. And I think part of the pandemic, we're seeing the fruits of that. Did this where, it's not like when you have a meeting face to face, you hang, you interact and you see people, and you can interact after the meeting, before the meeting, and have side conversations. In Zoom, you don't, no one's having, how do you have a side conversation in Zoom, And so you kind of missed out on these dynamics about being known, about sharing, things are going on in life. And it's not like you have to have a newsletter posting like Sally's dog, had to be taken to the vet. Like, but people do know. And so you at least have some knowledge so that there's some connectivity. So again, if you're out, someone might say, oh yeah, man, they just had a kid, or they had, some life event. And you can have empathy and you can have connection over that, or celebration, or support. When we don't have that, it makes, I think, like you say, then people, that's one of the reasons maybe they're not happy in life. And if you don't have people happy in life, they're going to bring that into work too. And that's where, it's kind of like the Zootopia DMV experience with a sloth.
Oh, yeah.
If you ever see that, that's why I think most people think about local government is just, it's just, who wants to interact with local government? It's just the worst. And I think it should be the best. It should be a place of great. I mean, Chris Gilbert is a Springfield Township Administrator right down the road from you, and that's his whole thing is customer service. Like we can do better. We can make it a great experience, because what we're doing, if it really is significant, how do we make people feel that? Like, let's celebrate all the things that you provide.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So good. Well, tell us about what's going on in Colerain. What are some of the challenges that you think when you look at the scope of city management? What are some of the opportunities that you're excited about that you would say, this is why this is great work? And also, what are the challenges that you think are facing the role right now that you're trying to work through?
Yeah. I mean, what's exciting is just sort of seeing the actual physical landscape of your community change, and for the better. So like in Colerain, we don't have a lot of sidewalks that connect to things like schools. And so we've been very intentional about building those, because if students are having to walk a mile to get to school and they've got to walk on the shoulder or in the roadway, that's just not safe. So it's super exciting for me to see those projects come to fruition, and to start to see, the kids utilizing that, or a mom pushing, a stroller on the sidewalk that we just built. Like that is awesome. On the challenges front, I think it's things like policing. It's a major issue, because while we think the pipeline for city managers may be short, I think the pipeline is even shorter in that world. And the external media pressures aren't exactly a great recruitment tool for anyone that might be thinking about becoming an officer someday. And so finding ways to, shine light on the humanity behind the police work is important. And then finding ways to keep that pipeline fresh and full is really important, because at the end of the day, those jobs are necessary and they're not going to go away. And you can't just keep, I guess, you got to find a way to get a new bucket or something, because you've got to reinvigorate the next generation to want to be in those types of roles.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of the reasons, again, the podcast exists. And I'm trying to be a stark difference than what usually media is, right? And I think that's the problem with media today. It's much easier to sell a negative message. It's much easier to sell drama. And sadly, it's like, when you're driving on the interstate and you see a car wreck, everyone slows down, which is so weird, like our fascination with drama and negative. And that's where we have to tell the stories. And that's where, I know like guys like Sam Tolles, trying to do great work helping cities tell better stories. How do we use social media? I mean, that's one of the things too. A lot of cities, like you say the word social media and everyone just like
Yeah.
tenses up, and it's like, who's commenting what now? And it's like, no, like, how do we use them for
Yeah.
good? How do we tell the great stories, and not just the stories of what you do, but the humans behind it? I think that's the thing, is like, these are amazing people. Like, you don't go into local government to get rich. You don't go in because I'm going to be some significant, they're going to write biographies about me.
Right.
That's not the reality of public administration. And yet, I think it's one of the issues I'm just concerned about. I love sociology and just study of humans. And everyone, it seems like there's this great push to, I talk with a lot of young people. I'm going to be an influencer. I'm going to have a YouTube channel. It's like, do you know the grind of producing content? Like,
Yep.
oh my gosh, like, here's real missional work. Here's real essential services, water,
Right.
sewer. Can you imagine? I mean, is Cincinnati, if all of a sudden the local government just closed down, how would people survive? It'd be the Walking Dead in like 3 days.
Right.
And yet this is, and so how do we tell that message? And so, I think, do you guys do a citizen academy in Colerain? How are you guys trying to get that message out to your people?
Yeah. So we do 3 different ones. So we do one specific to police, one specific to fire, and then one that's sort of township wide. They're at different times in the year, so that's good. And then they've got an alumni network that kind of helps to encourage folks that when this comes up. And, with the fire and police one, they have exciting things that they get to do, like demonstrations and rappelling down 3-story buildings. Township one isn't as exciting, so we try to make that fun. So I usually play a game or two. So I think one year I did a version of The Price is Right, where I put random items on a board, and they had to tell me high or low or all that, and it opened people's eyes to how much things like fire trucks costs and how much it costs to pave a roadway, or healthcare, all that kind of fun stuff. A different year I did Jeff Purdy, so taking that little, I don't know, there's a skit on the internet called Jeff Purdy, and just doing that, but all township related facts. And so just trying to find unique and creative ways to get people to engage and learn more about what we do. And so with the township one, it kicks off with me usually, and then each department director gets a night where they try to do something tactile. So if it's public works, they're up in the garage, they're touching the trucks, they're seeing the equipment, they're talking about how many lanes we maintain, all that good stuff. Just so people have a better understanding and appreciation for what we do and also what we don't do. So if they're up at public works and they're not seeing a Vector truck, that's because we don't handle the sewers. And so it's, hey, if you got sewer problems, here's who you have to call for those things. So I think the Township Academy has been a great tool for us to just get folks to just better understand the day-to-day going-ons of the community.
I think that's so great. A couple things. First, part of the issue is the curse of knowledge. I talk about it all the time. And like, you'll never be below an 8 in your knowledge of all that a city does. And your resident on their best day, fully educated, will never be above a 3. Well, that's a huge gap. And so sometimes I think when we do these citizen academies, they can be so over the heads that we kind of miss out. I love that idea of The Price is Right. Like, let's talk about like the things that we do and the cost. Like, this is what your tax actually goes to. Like, it is crazy expensive to pave a street. Maybe that's why we don't come out every time there's a pothole, because we have to look, we might be ripping up that street in 3 weeks to do some other thing. So we're going to wait, and like, we got to make sure we're stewarding your dollars well. So that education too, I think this is why I love citizen academies, is not only do they help your people understand more, but they become, if you do them right, you build raving fans. Mm-hmm. And then you're motivating the people that when stuff hits the fan, or when, Billy Bob gets on the comment section and is a complete fart, people can go like, no, that's not it, man. I went down there and they're actually awesome. Like, and I think that's where, just to encourage, I know we're busy, but these are some of the things that I think, yes, it's great to have social media and it's great to be funny and, tell the stories. It's better, just like we've talked about the whole time with internships, it's better for people to experience it, and them coming down and touring City Hall and kind of walking through the motions and going, oh, this is what this is. Oh, I didn't know I had access. I didn't know I could actually come to City Hall meetings and hear about what's going on, or access this on Zoom or whatever it is. Like, I think just the more we educate, because I think we assume that we know it all. Like, oh, this is duh. And it's like, it's not a duh to your people. And so
Yep.
how do we make it? I love that you made it fun. I think that's the key too. Make it an experience that they remember. Oh, it's good work. Well, what else, Jeff? Anything else that you'd like to us to cover when it comes to your story? What an incredible story! I love kind of the weave and the weave and the flow of it, and now in the big chair in Colerain Township. I think I'm excited to keep watching what you're doing there and seeing just its continued growth and flourishing. I like you said, sidewalks. That's something people are like, would people even notice unless you're using it? But it's so important. Can you imagine, like, again, just the safety, just the environment of having more people out and walking and doing community life. I think that's one of the things people don't realize is those kind of infrastructure things do more for just well-being than we realize. And yet no one's probably going to throw a parade because the sidewalk was made. And yet it's such vital work.
Yeah. We try to do ribbon cuttings, but they're not really well attended on sidewalk ribbon cuttings. But, no, I mean, it's exciting. There's always a new problem to tackle. And so I know I'm lucky to be in a role like this where you get to tackle them, right? And so do something fun every day. And even on the days that are challenging, you look back on them, a month or two later and go, it really wasn't the end of the world. Like, we figured it out. We got through it. And now we learned something. So yeah, it's a fun job. I hope more people explore what it means to be in this type of line of work and that they take the opportunity to get into it, because I think it's really rewarding.
Yep. I love it. Well, if you're young and you're looking for opportunities, again, maybe Northern Kentucky University is calling. I know that Northern Illinois University is a great school for an MPA and would encourage you to look into that program if you're looking for a next step. And internship, if you're in Ohio, just like I love that you Milton. I've got to call Milton now and just be like, oh man, I talked with Jeff today. I think that's how cool that now you get to be that guy.
Sure.
Now, you had that experience and now you get to pass it on. Oh, I love it. So cool. And so, man, Jeff, thanks for sharing your life, your leadership journey, your insights. It's a real privilege and a pleasure to hear your story.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
The stories we share here on the HaltingWinter podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at haltingwinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.